The old house stood on a hill overlooking the town. People said it was haunted. Whispers spoke of a family tragedy, a gruesome murder-suicide. Locals avoided the house. They claimed to hear screams at night. Children dared not to go near. The stories varied. Some said a jealous husband murdered his wife and children. Others claimed a scorned lover sought revenge. No one knew for sure. But everyone agreed. Something evil lingered within those walls. The truth, lost to time, was far more sinister. The house held a darkness that ran deeper than any rumor. It waited patiently for unsuspecting souls. It fed on their fear, growing stronger with each terrified heartbeat. The mansion was a testament to decay. Its paint peeled, revealing rotting wood beneath. The iron gates, rusted and broken, hung precariously. Weeds choked the overgrown gardens. The windows, like vacant eyes, stared out blindly. Inside, dust lay thick, undisturbed for years. Cobwebs draped the furniture like shrouds. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of damp and decay. Each footstep echoed in the silence, amplifying the sense of unease. The mansion was a labyrinth of dark hallways and shadowy rooms. Each turn seemed to lead further into its depths. The silence was broken only by the creaking of the house. It was as if it were breathing, whispering secrets best left unheard. John, a young writer seeking inspiration, arrived in town. He'd heard the stories, of course, but he dismissed them as local superstition. He was drawn to the mansion, intrigued by its tragic past. He rented the house, ignoring the warnings from the townsfolk. They shook their heads and muttered under their breath. They knew better than to challenge the darkness that resided there, but John, blinded by ambition, paid them no heed. He moved into the mansion with his typewriter and a stack of blank paper. He was eager to start his new project. He believed the house would provide the perfect backdrop for his horror novel. He had no idea how right he was. The first few days were uneventful. John explored the house, fascinated by its decay. He started writing, his fingers flying across the keys. He drew inspiration from the mansion's eerie atmosphere, but as the days turned into nights, things began to change. John started to hear strange noises, footsteps in the hallway, whispers in the dead of night. He dismissed them at first, attributing them to his imagination. He began to feel a presence in the house, a coldness that settled on his skin, a feeling of being watched. He started seeing things out of the corner of his eye, shadows moving in the darkness. But when he turned to face them, they vanished. Section 5. An unexpected guest. One night, John was awakened by a sound. A soft, mournful cry. It seemed to be coming from the end of the hallway. He got out of bed and cautiously followed the sound. As he approached the sound, he saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was a woman, dressed in a long white gown. Her back was to him, and her head was bowed. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. "Hello?" John called out, his voice trembling slightly. The woman didn't respond. She just continued to sob, her cries echoing in the silent hallway. John took a step closer, reaching out a hand. "Are you all right?" Section 6. The Attic's Secret. The figure turned slowly, almost as if it was moving through water. Her face, pale and gaunt, was streaked with tears that glistened in the dim light, each drop reflecting a lifetime of sorrow. Her eyes, wide and vacant, stared through John, as if she was looking at something far beyond him, something only she could see. He gasped, stumbling back in horror, his mind struggling to comprehend the ghostly apparition before him. The woman, if she could be called that, was clearly not alive. Her form was translucent, shimmering faintly in the gloom. John fled back to his room, slamming the door shut behind him with a force that echoed through the empty halls. He leaned against the door, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum, each beat a reminder of the terror he had just witnessed. He tried to rationalize what he had seen, his mind racing through possible explanations. A trick of the light? Perhaps a shadow cast by the flickering bulb, a hallucination brought on by stress. He rubbed his temples, trying to ease the tension that had built up. But deep down he knew the truth. The mansion was haunted. The fear in his eyes was undeniable. He spent the next few days avoiding the hallway where he had seen the woman, his steps cautious and his heart heavy with dread. He tried to focus on his writing, but the encounter had shaken him deeply. His fingers hovered over the keys, unable to form coherent thoughts. His once inspiring sanctuary now felt like a prison, the walls closing in on him, suffocating his creativity and filling him with an overwhelming sense of dread. Section 7. A ghastly discovery. One day John stumbled upon a hidden door in the back of a closet. Curiosity got the better of him and he cautiously opened it. A musty smell wafted out and he peered inside. The door led to a narrow staircase that ascended into darkness. John hesitated for a moment, then slowly climbed the stairs. The steps creaked under his weight, each one echoing in the silence. He emerged into a dusty attic. The attic was dimly lit by a single cobweb-covered window. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight that pierced through the grime. In the center of the room sat an old wooden chest, its lid slightly ajar. John approached the chest, his heart pounding in his chest. Section 8. Trapped. The night was thick with fog, and the old mansion stood ominously against the dark sky. John lifted the lid of the chest, his heart pounding in his chest. The air was thick with dust, and the hinges creaked loudly, echoing in the silence. Inside, he found a pile of old letters, yellowed with age. Each letter seemed to hold a piece of the past, a story waiting to be told. He picked up one of the letters and began to read, the paper fragile under his fingers. The room seemed to grow colder as he read. The letter was dated over a century ago and was written in a flowing, elegant hand. The ink had faded, but the words were still legible. As John read the letter, his blood ran cold. The words on the page seemed to come alive, painting a picture of despair and hopelessness. It was a suicide note written by the former owner of the house. The words were filled with sorrow and regret, a final farewell to a world that had been too cruel. The letter described a series of tragic events that had befallen the family. Each sentence was a glimpse into a life filled with pain and suffering. The writer spoke of a haunting presence in the house, an evil that had driven him to madness. The shadows seemed to move as John read, as if the house itself was alive. John dropped the letter, his hand shaking. The reality of the words he had just read was too much to bear. He had stumbled upon the dark secret of the mansion. The air around him felt heavy, as if the house was closing in on him. As he turned to leave, he heard the sound of the attic door slamming shut. The noise echoed through the empty halls, sending a chill down his spine. He rushed to the door and tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as he realized he was trapped. The walls seemed to close in, and the darkness felt suffocating. Section 9. The Haunting Truth. John rattled the door handle, but it wouldn't move. He was locked in the attic. Panic began to set in. He was trapped in the house with the vengeful spirits of the family he had read about. He looked around the attic, searching for another way out. But there was none. He was trapped. He sank to the floor, his back against the wall. He could hear the whispers again, closer now, swirling around him. The temperature dropped, and the air grew thick with the smell of decay. John felt a cold hand on his shoulder and turned slowly to face it. The woman from the hallway stood behind him, her face contorted in a rictus of rage. Section 10. Unsettled Spirits. John screamed, his voice echoing through the empty halls of the haunted mansion. He scrambled to his feet and backed away, but the ghostly woman drifted towards him with an eerie grace, her eyes locked onto his. Her touch sent a shock of ice through his body, freezing him in place. He could feel the cold seeping into his bones, paralyzing him with fear. He knew then that he wouldn't escape this house alive. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. and despair washed over him. The whispers grew louder, morphing into screams of anguish and despair. They seemed to come from all directions, surrounding him, suffocating him. John recognized the voices from the letters he had found earlier. They were the voices of the family who had lived here, trapped in their torment. The family, trapped in their torment, were reaching out to claim him as one of their own. Their ghostly hands reached for him, pulling him into their world. John closed his eyes, accepting his fate. He knew there was no escape, no way out of this nightmare. The mansion on the hill had claimed another victim. Its dark history continued to grow, one soul at a time. The darkness that clung to the house, fueled by tragedy and despair, would continue to feed on the fear of those who dared to enter. It was a never-ending cycle of horror. The mansion remained, a silent sentinel overlooking the town. Its presence was a constant reminder of the evil that lurked within, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked within its walls, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to cross its threshold. The house was always hungry for more. The haunting continued, an endless cycle of terror forever echoing within the mansion on the hill. The spirits would never rest, and the house would never be free of its curse.